Welcome to the Liberated Equestrian Podcast and community. This is a place for horsewomen to experience belonging, breakthrough, and becoming. I'm your host, Lisa Pulliam, founder of StableMinded.us, mental health professional, second season equestrian, and author of Finding Calm, helping riders navigate through fear and anxiety. The Liberated Equestrian is devoted to the mission of being set free and experiencing breakthroughs in every aspect of our horsemanship and humanship. This is all about mind, body, heart, and soul care for ourselves, our horses, and the people we do life with, so that we can grow together as a community of emotionally and relationally healthy horsewomen. So find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let's embark on this journey of becoming liberated equestrians together. Hey everyone, I'm so glad to have you back on the Liberated Equestrian Podcast. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Cathy Woods. She is a longtime yogini, horsewoman, author, yoga teacher, international retreat leader and presenter, and creator of her trademark program, Body, Mind, Equine. She focuses on overall equestrian wellness, which is of course why I'm having her here with us. You may have encountered Cathy on the equine front, partly because Cathy has partnered with amazing venues such as Equitana, Liberty Festival, Equine Affair, Warwick Schiller's Journey on Summit, Tyron International Equestrian Center, and Sea Lazy U Ranch, to name a few. So if you're in the equestrian spaces, these names will mean something to you. Cathy also shares her work through her book, Yoga for Riders, which is published by Horse and Rider Books. And she has written for publications such as Horse Illustrated magazine and others. Cathy has been featured on Forbes, Yoga Digest, Horse and Rider magazine, and many other publications. And I actually connected with Cathy in person at Honeybrook Stables, home of Horse Class, for quite the season. And so I'm super excited to have Cathy with us today and reconnect with her for the first time in quite some time. Welcome to the podcast, Cathy. We're so glad to have you here.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to share and talk and catch up with you. It has been a minute. So thank you so much for having me on. And I really look into diving into whatever direction our conversation goes, because as we know, so much falls under that umbrella of equestrian wellness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Cathy, you are actually coming to us from what part? I know you're in the mountains. Tell us where you're coming in from.
Yeah, I'm in the North Carolina Smoky Mountains. It's a snowy, chilly winter morning here, and I live remotely in a little town near Fontana Lake that most people don't even know about. So it's kind of the secret part of the Smokies.
Yeah. So, and I share that with you guys because there may be points in which you're going to hear the connection with Cathy dip out and not be super strong. And I'm going to do my best in the editing of that to make this a wonderful experience for us. But connection was not enough reason to not have Cathy on the podcast, because she has so much wisdom and perspective for us. You have been a horsewoman for decades and a yoga instructor for many, many years. So kind of give us a little bit of the backstory of how you entered into these two spaces, you know, in a nutshell, so to speak.
In a nutshell, yeah, because it's kind of a big nutshell.
Yeah.
Been teaching yoga about 34 years. I always say I was a born yogi because it was really in my blood, in my DNA, in my awareness, even before I knew it was, quote, yoga. So I've been teaching yoga a very long time. And I always say it's a really good job to have because it never feels like a job. It's actually a practice that I use in my own life, not just on the mat, but the mindfulness and energy awareness and various aspects of the tradition I incorporate into my life. So yoga has very much been part of my world for a long time, as have horses, I'd say for the last 30 plus years. And I really merged the two about maybe 17 years ago when I created what I call my Body, Mind, Equine program. And that is basically how we can use the whole of yoga to improve our horsemanship from ground to saddle. And when I say the whole of yoga, again, I mean energy awareness, breathing awareness, body awareness, the whole practice. Whereas most people think of yoga and just think of the physical stretches, because that's really what we see, depicted a lot on social media. But there's a whole lot more to yoga, and it pairs so nicely with our time with equines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say this because I have shared on the podcast that I am a Christian, right? And that
Mhm.
my faith is integrated into everything I do. And I'm hearing you kind of describe that, like the way you approach mind body, wellness as a horsewoman, as a yoga instructor is all integrated as well. And I want to put this out here right in the beginning because there are going to be some Christians out there that are going to go, why is she having a yoga instructor on the podcast when she says she's a Christian? And as I said from the very beginning of this podcast, I'm having people of various worldviews and perspectives and faith background and practices a part of this experience because I think that living in kind of I can't do that, shut down place
Mhm.
doesn't allow us to really become that liberated equestrian, that person who is free to be who we feel we are called to be and find our plumb line of truth and direction. And so I that is part of the reason I'm having you on. And also because when I was with you, I had the opportunity to go through one of your retreats and I bought your book and I integrate some of the things that you have taught me through that retreat experience into my practice. And so there's so much value you have to offer regardless of where we all fall on, you know, faith, practice, whatever it is, right? And so I just want to put that out there because I know there's going to be a few listeners that are going to go, "What is she doing?" And I'm like, "Nope, I am doing what I say we should do as liberated equestrians." And so, kind of with that, I want to ask you this question: what do you think it means to be a liberated equestrian?
Wow, there is a lot that falls under that umbrella as well. First, I'd like to address what you just talked about. I also grew up in a very Christian background, so my roots are in that faith. Practicing yoga, practicing awareness, practicing mindfulness is really non-denominational, and really whatever your spiritual practice is, meditating, learning to get still, learning to regulate the nervous system, learning to connect with higher
Mm-hmm.
power, that's universal. So I kind of stay away from too many titles because I feel like that compartmentalizes us. We're all humans. We're all having the human experience. We're in these earth suits, in this earth school. And it is about learning and expanding. And simply in a nutshell, the word yoga, it's not a really mystical word. It simply means to unite or to yoke body, mind, and spirit. And the idea is that when we are integrated on our yoga mats, we're present to the breath, the body, our energy of higher power, and one can define higher power however they like. The idea is we start taking that more heightened and integrated awareness with us off the mat into all that we do.
Mm,
So, one of my missions is to make yoga and horsemanship accessible to anyone and everyone, regardless of what your background looks like, spiritual background, lifestyle background,
mhm,
and also regardless of what your horsemanship or yoga looks like. I mean, if your yoga looks like chair yoga, because that's you can't get up and down off the floor, that's okay. If your horsemanship looks like simply grooming your horse, that's okay. So
mhm.
those are all things that fall under being a liberated equestrian. And they say that yoga is the path to liberation, to
Ah,
self-realization. So it ties in really nicely, I think, with the topic that you cover with so many different people.
mhm,
Being liberated equestrian, I think, does mean being open-minded, being expansive, being open to new ways of thinking and
mhm.
being authentic to who you are and what your path is in horsemanship or lifemanship, regardless of what other people think about that. So I think all those things fall under liberation, being liberated.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. As you were describing that, my mind, I'm very visual, so I was kind of going through my mind of the different aspects of the retreat experience with you, which you're still leading those retreats,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I see them come through on my email. And I have this memory of being on the mat and you teaching us about breath. And you gave us lots of different ways to expand our breath, enhance our breath, and be able to like have an awareness of our limits on that, but also like practical steps for growth on our breath. So I would love for you to, on that aspect, really share about why is breath so important
Mm.
as a human. And everybody hears me talk about this all the time from a mental health perspective. But what is your perspective on that? And how does breath translate to your horsemanship?
Good question. So in yoga, because I do come somewhat from that background, the yoga of breath is called pranayama. And prana, in essence, means life force energy. You can call that energy spirit. You can call that universe. You can call that God. You can call it prana. You can call it chi, depending on your tradition, right? So breath links us through to prana, to life force energy. Regardless of our backgrounds or differences, we all breathe. We're all living, breathing beings. There are direct links between breath and emotions, for one. If we were to become fearful, anxious, angry, right now, if we heard a loud sound, we would all kind of suck up our breath,
Mhm.
change our breath pattern. So there is a direct link to breath and emotion. So horses are good button pushers to get our emotions triggered. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's complacency, whatever we're experiencing. But the breath can help regulate our nervous system, our emotions, our minds, our blood pressure.
Mm.
And there are different breathing techniques we learn through yoga tradition. One of the most basic breaths we call the complete breath, or the three-part yogic breath. And that's kind of just a nice grounding, centering, focusing breath, helps to notch down that nervous energy. Now, for example, if you're feeling really lethargic and tired and sleepy that day, we have other breaths that are more energizing breaths, such as Kapalabhati, or the bellows breath. If you're feeling very nervous and scattered, there's something we call alternate nostril breathing that helps balance right and left hemisphere of the brain. So the breath can regulate so many different things. And this is an ancient science. And now more and more modern science is coming
Mhm.
out supporting this. But as you know, Lisa, the horses feel our blood pressure, they feel our nervous system, they feel our heartbeat. So when we're coming to them from a centered, grounded, collected place, they feel that. When we're coming to them from a nervous, scattered, fearful, anxious, ego oriented place, they feel that as well. And they respond to that. And some horses respond to that bigger than others. So, breath is just a great tool that we literally always have right in our pocket. We can use it in a traffic jam. We can use it online at the grocery store. We can use it when we're riding our horse. So, let me give you a little story about how I use the breath while I'm riding. So I
Mm.
like to trail ride here in the Smokies, avid backcountry trail rider, and our trails are very, very technical, narrow ridges, everything's up and down, lots of slippery creek crossings. So when I know a trail and I know, oh goodness, that slippery creek crossing is coming up, and I start feeling myself getting in a wad about that, then I start feeling my horse getting a wad about that because he's learning.
Right.
I check in with my breathing and I notice, oh, my breath got shallow because I got nervous and fearful. So I will start deepening the breath before I come to that tricky spot on the trail, trying to notch my nervous energy down and breathe myself and my horse into quietness. And it truly does work. I've seen it so many times. And in my retreats with equines, I do a segment called Breathing with Horses because they're
Mhm.
living, breathing beings. And it's beautiful when we can even sync up our breath and just recognize that these are other sentient beings that we are partnering with. So
Yeah.
breath is just a great and most basic tool to help bring us back. When our mind wanders, we can come back to the breath. When we feel nervous, we can come back to the breath. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, big advocate of infusing our yoga and our horsemanship with breath. And that's the nice thing on the mat. We're practicing infusing the yoga postures with breath. And when we
Yeah.
get into a challenging yoga posture, say you're in a spinal twist and you feel like, I can't really breathe that deeply. I feel a
Mhm.
little challenged. That's when we start trying to breathe more fully and deeply. So we start to infuse challenges on the mat with breath. Then we start to use that breath work when we get into challenges in our horsemanship or in our daily lives, because goodness knows life puts us in challenging life postures at times too.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a beautiful example. And I have a story just from yesterday, actually. Um, we're recording this in the end of February, mid end of February. So it's wicked cold in Pennsylvania. I haven't ridden in a week because of frozen ground, weather, the whole thing. And in that 5-day period, there was a lot that happened in my personal life. A lot of really heightened emotional situations that were outside of my control. And I was unaware of how much I had been holding because I hadn't taken time to do much exercise or any sort of stretching in those 5 days. I hadn't been in the saddle. I'd interacted with Cody on the ground. Things were fine. So everything's fine. We walk up to the mounting block and he's like, no, ma'am. And I was like, what is going on here? He never walks off from the mounting block ever. And he walked off significantly. And then when he stood at the mounting block, he's pawing at the ground. He bent down. He like touched me. He's touching me. He like puts his mouth and bites on the mounting block. And his stress response is the like an Italian grandmother that goes like, and bites their hand. That's his like response. And I was like, what's happening here? I was totally unaware that it was me until I saw him. And so I asked him again and I went back to breathing. I was like, okay, I need to lighten this energy. I need to do some big exhales. I need to find a little bit lightness in my spirit and release in that moment. And sure enough, he came back around, he stood, I got on, we walked off. And it was when we walked off and I felt my body start to move that I realized how much tightness I had locked up inside. And so this next part of this, like connected to that breath part, is I found myself stretching like you taught us to stretch on horseback, which I sometimes incorporate that into my like warm up with him. We're very like loose reined, lots of movement, go anywhere kind of warm up. But I haven't done like the stand up in the stirrups and twist back kind of move and do all this stuff with my body. But because of that experience with him and recognizing this tightness in me, I was like, oh, I need more openness. I need to reach and stretch. And I was like, oh, how funny. I'm talking to Cathy tomorrow and I'm doing Cathy poses. Yeah,
Oh,
the one right on the cover of your book was like, that's what
yeah.
I was doing. And I was like, oh, this is such beautiful feedback from Cody and the relationship that he's now at the point of telling me what I need, not just me telling him what he needs. It was
I
amazing.
love
So
that. I love that.
yeah.
That's a great story. And something we need to remember too is restrictions in our bodies and restrictions in our mind actually restrict the horse. So when our bodies are tight and tense and we've got death grip on the reins or we're squeezing tightly with our butt cheeks, we're actually transmitting that tension to our horse and it restricts their movement. The
Mhm.
same thing if we have mental restrictions, we're having mental blocks, and whether we're aware of it or not, that restricts the horse as well. We talk about a lot in horsemanship and training, and I'm not a trainer, but I know plenty of them. About doing collection, having your horse to be collected, doing groundwork with your horse. I call the yoga mat and the meditation cushion a place to do collection and groundwork for the human, because we're
Mm.
always asking our horses to like do all this, do all this, do all this, and then what are we doing to come to them in a more aligned place and space? And when we are aligned and congruent, body, mind, spirit, all present, all in one place, doing one thing at one time, which in essence is yoga, then we have much more fruitful interactions with our horse. We know what it's like to be around somebody that's out of alignment. And again, we're part of the human condition. So we all get out of alignment. Nobody has really mastered that art that I know of. But we know what it feels like to be around somebody that feels good and aligned and centered. And we know what it feels like to be around somebody who's angry or bossy or ego oriented, task oriented. We can pick up on that, and certainly our horses can. And that kind of goes into energy awareness, Lisa. It's like people hear the word energy and think woo woo, esoteric. Not so much. There's energy flowing through the trees, through the planets, through us, through the ocean. So everything is energy. And we as humans have the ability to detect energy, again, around different people. Or we walk into a space and we go, oh, it really feels good to be in this space. Or we walk into a space and go, just got to get out of here. It doesn't feel good. That's
Mhm.
detecting energy. And that's the nonverbal world that horses live in all the time. I mean, in the wild, they're constantly detecting energy shifts within the herd, within the surroundings. So a lot of this goes back to energy awareness too. Like, what energy are we bringing to our horsemanship today? Are we bringing centered grounded energy? Are we bringing nervous scattered energy? Are we bringing sleepy tired energy? And we, through practices of mindfulness, we can learn to kind of manipulate and level the playing field a little bit with those energies.
Yeah, yeah. And in that practice that you teach so well, it's breath, it's energy, and then it's also this body movement, right? Like, and understanding where your tightness is, where you're limited, where you're not in balance, and that's all going to affect the horse when we get on their back. It can even, I noticed this yesterday working with one of the horses on the ground, that tightness can even affect how we are on the ground with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, I like to say, yoga is not about flexibility. It's not about athletic ability. It's not about competition. What is it about? One word, it's about awareness. It's an awareness practice. Again, we become more aware of our bodies, minds, spirits on the mat, and then again, carry that with us into our horsemanship. And I also say, what makes a good rider is a little piece I do in my retreats. And people will shout out great answers, and none of them are wrong. And I'll hear things like balance and experience and being brave, and none of those are wrong. But I rarely hear the word, what makes a good rider? Awareness. I
Yeah.
feel like awareness is the key to everything. And
Yeah.
as you said, just being aware of your own body mechanics is so important. Are my feet symmetrical in the stirrups? Am I aware of my sitting bones? Am I on the saddle and my shoulders are wrapped up under my ears with tension, and then I can do a few shoulder rolls while I'm mounted and let those shoulders go?
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
it's important to add too, when I say yoga for riders, I'm never doing like crazy extreme yoga postures on the back of a horse. Personally, I don't see value to that.
Mhm.
Any stretch that I do while we're mounted has value to the equestrian to learn to move from center. Where is my center? Symmetry,
Mhm.
again, releasing tension. So they're never headstands, handstands, downward dogs. We're never doing anything that can hurt the horse or injure ourselves. They're just movements to get us to slow down, to connect with our body, to connect with our breath. So then when we start riding, we are connected with those things.
Mhm. As I'm listening to you describe that, I'm kind of having this big aha that I don't know if I've chatted about this on the podcast before, but it was about my awareness in the saddle, based on the actual saddle that I was riding Cody in. And from the very beginning, in that saddle, I just never was comfortable. It was like an ill-fitting pair of pants that you're like, I know these are designer jeans and I should love them, but they are irritating the daylights out of me. And you put them on and you wear them and you're like, I can't do this anymore. And I rode in that saddle for 2 years. And in the I ended up buying a used saddle for like under $1,000 used, which is like a steal for a English saddle. Um, it's like practically a no name saddle. I shouldn't even say that. It's a Cavaletti. I love my Cavaletti. I'm going to say that boldly. I am comfortable in the saddle. I now can find my seat bones. I can open my hips. I can find center in my body. I don't feel pitched in my back. I am present in the saddle because I'm not distracted by pain, the
Mm.
physical pain, trying to adjust. I also ended up getting really fancy irons that rotate because my body conformation is such that to if I stood with my feet straight ahead, my knees point fiercely in.
Mhm.
So in order for my leg and hip to be like appropriately comfortable, my toes need to point out a little bit like a duck. And if
Mhm.
you're riding in a traditional iron, it doesn't work. And so these new irons. So I basically changed the whole get up, like the princess and the pea, in order to be present and not distracted by the pain that my body was feeling.
That's great. Yeah, and that comes, you had so much awareness to know that, whereas somebody else might have just rode through that and thought, well, this is just how this saddle feels. And you had enough body awareness to know something feels a little off, right? And
Right.
I say that too, like when we get in position to do a little meditation or breath work, I'll tell people, get in a position that's not going to be a distraction for you in 5 minutes, because otherwise that's
Yeah.
all you're focusing on, not being able to get still, to get quiet, or in your case, hard to focus on your riding or the horse when you're constantly shifting around trying to get comfortable. So that's great awareness.
Yeah. And I think it began working with you because I think that retreat helped me connect the dots of this matters in the saddle. And then I read a few things over the course of like that, a 2-year period of Cody in that saddle that kept on reiterating that. Like I very clearly remember sitting on the floor in that room and you saying, get in a position that will not distract you. And
Mhm.
thinking how many times, well, I can't be in this position in the saddle. I'm distracted the whole time because I'm trying to get comfortable.
Yeah. And I
Right.
think this is a good place to mention too that we all have different bodies, different body types. We've all had different injuries, accidents, surgeries over a lifetime. So everybody's body moves and operates a little differently. So for somebody else, that saddle may have been great. And that's another thing I tell people when we're on the mat, on the yoga mat, do not compare yourself to anybody, because I promise you, you're not going to look like me or the person next to you, because your body is your body, and we're all created differently. So to learn self-correction, micro movements, modifications to help make, whether it's riding or yoga, work for our bodies. That ties back into awareness again too.
Yeah,
To stay
absolutely.
out of that comparing game, because like that robs us of a lot of energy. Like, oh, that person's stretching better than me, that person's thinner than me, that person's more fit. Or in the riding arena, oh well, that person sits that saddle fine, or wow, look at how
Mhm.
how fluid they are with their horse, I feel kind of clunky. So we get into that comparison game, and that's just like a total energy drain and energy waste. I say, when our mind starts doing that stuff, wherever, on the mat, in the saddle, in life, thank the mind for its opinion and come back to the breath. Just
Yes.
notice that chatter, that you don't have to buy into it all the time, and discern what's pertinent, and just come back to the breath. So, these
I
are what I
love
call
that.
the parallels of yoga and horsemanship.
Yeah, and I wanna go into one more.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things you had us do on the retreat was go through like, we got on horseback, we did our stretches, and then I remember 2 different parts, and I don't know if they're related together, so I want you to clarify for me. I remember you talking about your attention and focus and the length of the, like, strides. Like, I left that experience kinda thinking, in my personal life and in my riding life, can I look this far ahead and this far behind in order to stay in the present moment? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I'm big on talking about the present moment, because that's really all that exists, right? The past is history, future is a mystery, present is a gift, and that's why it's called the present. I didn't make that saying up, but I rather like it. So we tend to dwell on things in the past, we tend to project into the future, and we end up missing the here and the now. And again, it's a wonderful, yoga teaches us a wonderful practice and wonderful tools to stay present. I'm in downward dog and I'm stretching, and oh, this stretch feels so good. And then my mind's like, what am I cooking for supper later? And then, oh, thank the mind for its opinion, come back to downward dog. So, our minds take us out of stuff a lot, and we're projecting and we're dwelling and we're riding our horse. We're missing the moment. Guess who knows when you're not present? Your horse.
Yeah.
When I'm riding, when I'm riding and I'm not present, I'm overly chatty with friends, or I'm digging around in my saddlebag for something. That's the exact moment my horse is going to stumble or pin his ears at the horse next to him, or take a bite of grass, because he knows mom's no longer present. And I'm not going to get this quote right, but I know this may be kind of what you're referring to at the retreat that you attended. So we talk about being present, but as we all know, when you're riding riding horses, you are multitasking. You're watching the horse next to you doesn't get too close. You're on a trail. You're making sure you don't step in that hole. You're making sure your reins are correct, making sure your body alignment is correct. So how do we multitask yet stay present? Are you familiar with Linda Kohanov? She wrote The Tao of Equus and Riding Between the Worlds. And she's a wealth of knowledge. And she was one of the early pioneers in doing this and has always been a mentor to me. I won't get her quote right, but she says something like, breathe deep, body and breath in the present moment and mind in the recent future.
That was the words I remember you saying.
And I love that. And I had to ponder that, like recent future. I've never heard of that, but that's keeping us in the moment. We're in the breath, we're in the body, we're in the present, but we're also paying attention to just what's next, just what's ahead. And that's, I think, how we marry the multitasking that's involved in horsemanship, yet staying in the present moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really struck me, especially as a trauma survivor who fantasy prone thinking for a trauma survivor, they look very far into the future. I just need to make it to this point and then everything will be okay. And it's a way to escape the present moment because it's so painful and you're like, I can't endure this. So if I put myself out there, I will be fine. But then when you get to a place in life, Lord willing, that you don't have that kind of trauma, that neural pathway, that pattern has stuck. And so you can still be in that pattern of living for the next thing and missing this moment. And so hearing you say that while I was writing this idea about recent future, I ended up kind of painting a picture in my mind of strides and arena lengths in that experience. Like how far ahead do I need to look and how far behind do I need to be aware of? And again, yesterday in my riding of Cody, there I was in a lesson, there was another gal riding, the arena was short because of the ice on the ground, and so we had to be really aware of space and time and who was moving where. So there was like kind of a look over my shoulder, like where are they and how quickly are they coming up on me? Am I going to the inside and calling it, making more decisions than normal? But it was within this limited fixed kind of stride length. Like, so I kind of thought to myself, like, I need to be aware of what's happening, like 4 strides behind or 4 lengths behind and, 20 strides ahead to be making decisions, kind of like where I need to live. And since your retreat, when I'm caught up in getting really ahead of myself, I'm like, okay, pick a few strides, just focus on that in my non-riding life.
Yeah, to kind of break that down. Absolutely. And, horsemanship is situational. So sometimes we can ride and just be in that really Zen space and there's no other distractions going on and we're just really present. And then there are times that, we may be on a trail with a lot of horses or we're in an arena. Like when you were there, I think we had probably 10 or 12 people in the arena.
Yeah.
And to be aware of that, what's going on with the horse next to you? Is that person up ahead on the trail having some trouble with their horse that I need to be aware of? So I think it's situational about how much we need to widen our gaze, but just to have that awareness that we do need to is important, because being so locked in the present moment, then we're not aware of, oh, that horse is coming up too close and my horse has got his ears pinned and he might kick. Just awareness can save. It can be a safety issue, right? As well.
Yeah. 100%.
A safety issue and an enjoyability issue. I mean, I've been on trail rides with friends and I love the camaraderie of friends, but sometimes we have done so much talking on the ride that I get off the ride and I think, I just didn't really experience nature. I didn't really experience being present with my horse. I was so distracted with all this conversation. So, we're kind of master multitaskers. I think we're kind of conditioned to do that. I mean, if you have a job, for example, your boss wants you to get as much done in that 8-hour day as you possibly can. We're eating supper and we're scrolling through our phones. Hopefully not, but that's kind of the norm these days. So, we're always multitasking. And what that does, Lisa, as you know, it fragments our energy. Our
Mm,
energy is then not collected. And again, our horses feel when we're fragmented or we're collected.
yeah, absolutely. Boy, we can spend an entire hour talking about
We
the consequences of that on our all
do.
of our relationships and our mental health and well-being. I want to
Yeah.
ask you one more thing. I want to like highlight one more thing
Yeah.
from your retreat, and then we'll move into some closing questions here. So the highlight of the retreat for me was actually riding to music. You had a fun little playlist. Shania Twain came on, and you're like, go with the music, just go with it. And I felt like a 5-year-old playing. And when
Yeah.
that, whew, my eyes are, I can get all wet on this one. When I, that to me was like a part of me that doesn't exist a lot. And it awakened that in me. And I want you to describe like why you integrate that process into the experience, what that is all about, what are the
Yeah.
benefits, how to do it. Like I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, I call it dancing with horses. It's different than the dressage dancing with horses. Um, but, music changes our energy, right? So if you're
Mhm.
at a party and you're on the dance floor and the DJ puts on some dreamy music and you're kind of moving a little slow, and then a little bit more peppy music comes on and your movements get a little bigger and a little more excited. And again, our horses are picking up that energy, because sometimes we'll be like, oh, our horse is lazy. Well, maybe we're lazy and we're lethargic and we're transmitting that, right? So through changing the music like that, and I do a playlist of usually 3 or 4 songs, and I start with something really mellow and ethereal, like Native American flute music. I love
Mhm.
using that. And then I pop up to maybe a little bit of like very superstitious Stevie Wonder, and then right, Shania Twain or Bruno Mars or something dancey. And it takes about 15 minutes to do this. And as the songs change, I get the participants to notice, is your energy changing? And as your energy is changing, is your horse's energy changing?
Mhm.
So I don't give them any insight at the beginning of this. I just say, I'm going to put some music on and just ride and just notice how you feel. And as the music changes, again, their energy changes. And then they'll say, oh, my horse likes this song, or my horse likes to dance. But it's probably ourselves that are dancing and getting energized. And then we transmit that to the horse and they pick up their step a little bit as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Also, having the music takes us out of our head a little bit of like, am I doing this right? Is this technically correct? And you can just enjoy the riding more. It helps people relax. And then when you relax your mind and your body, your horse also relaxes.
Yeah.
I love doing that piece with the music. And another piece that I hear is a favorite part of retreats, and everybody has resonates with different pieces. I do one segment where I lead the participants on the horse, and I'll just say, put your reins down.
Yeah.
And I lead what I call a mounted meditation in motion. And it's kind of like being a kid on a pony ride when you just allow yourself to be led. And as I'm leading the participants, I'm saying things like, focus on the coolness of the air entering your nostrils. Feel the warmth of the air exiting. Feel the
Mhm.
sun on your skin. Hear the hoof fall on the sand. What parts of your body are moving? So it really gets you into that mindful riding without having to rein and steer and watch what other horses are doing. So that and the music seem to be really some highlights for a lot of folks.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that part too. I remember being able to participate in that, and that walking meditation is often what a client will experience working with me in an equine assisted session where we're doing what we call rhythmic riding. And so
Mm.
whether that's like a regular client that we're doing equine assisted therapy or coaching with, or somebody that's coming in for a retreat, if it's a retreat experience, I almost always make it part of that experience because it raises the body awareness and gives that nervous system regulation. And once you taste that, you don't want to not have that.
Yes, I agree. It's the same with like meditating. Once you
Hmm.
find that peace of getting still and getting out of your own mind and your own body and just dwelling in stillness. Once you taste that and experience it, it's hard to not want to do that again. It feels
Yeah.
like something is missing. So yeah, I love those kinds of experiences where they become embodied.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that once you have that, like, I can close my eyes and feel the movement of the horse, it's
Mm,
also a really good reset when you're riding, if you can trust your horse on a loose rein to not walk you into a fence rail or a tree,
right.
to be able to take 4 or 5 steps and just kind of center yourself and
Yeah.
notice those movements, and the somatic awareness of what's happening around you is super beneficial.
Right. And even if we don't close our eyes, just kind of softening our gaze
Yeah,
really can
right.
help instead of having that real intense gaze or looking too far ahead, just kind of bringing your gaze into the present. And another practice I like to do, even before people mount up, is I get them to stand in the middle of the arena with their horses, especially if we're outside. This is a really nice piece. And I just say, what do you notice? Just tune into your
Mm.
awareness. What do you keenly notice? And it's interesting because I'll have 10 people in the retreat and 10 people will notice different things. Somebody will be
Yes.
like, oh, I heard that blue jay over there, or I'm watching the shadows change on the mountain as the sun moves, or I'm hearing my horse breathe.
Yeah.
So everybody has a different awareness and different perception. But when we just get still sometimes and widen that gaze, it's amazing what we can see. And it's amazing to notice what we're missing too.
Yeah, yeah, and that is something I do a similar exercise with clients called 5 4 3 2 1, and I've actually just posted a video about that on my socials, and the teaching video is in my Thrive toolbox. But 5 4 3 2 1, it's 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you smell, and then I change it up from what most people do. I do 2 things you sense touching your body.
Mm,
And some people will be like the wind, the sun. Other people will be like the socks, in my toes, or like the seams of my pants. It's interesting.
yeah.
And then the last part is one thing that you feel or sense on the inside. And
Mm,
you have a choice. And so some people will say, I feel calm, I feel anxious, I feel something emotional. Other people will describe the sensation. I feel tight, I feel hot, I feel like a worry. And so the way a client answers those questions helps me understand where they are in the here and now and what their highest level of awareness is. Some people are very somatically, like that physical sensation aware. Some people are very emotionally aware. Some people are very visually aware. And
mhm.
even on like the 5 things you see, sometimes people will only see things in like a little circle around them. And I'll say, can you look a little further out? Can you widen your
Mhm.
gaze, essentially?
Yeah.
And sometimes I won't say anything at all because I'm taking a pulse on how are they showing up in this moment, because that's where we're going to work from that moment forward.
Mhm.
And when I do it for myself, I can self-check and be like, "Lise, look further, listen longer, you know,
Yeah.
hear deeper." Like, I kinda can push myself a little bit to ground even further.
Lovely. And I
Yeah.
love that you bring that last piece in, like, what are you feeling? Because a lot of people will say what they notice visually or kind
Mhm.
of things that are obvious, but rarely do people want to bring up like what they're noticing internally. I'm feeling nervous. I'm feeling
Mhm.
calm. I'm feeling centered. So that's
Yeah.
great that you bring that piece in. And
Yeah.
I think there's different kinds of learners out there, and
Mhm.
that's why it's so great for podcasts like this to have different kinds of teachers and speakers and clinicians, because really we're all saying the same stuff just in slightly different languages, and
Yeah.
some people resonate with one language of that better than others, and can understand better.
Yeah.
So important to
Absolutely.
look at different perspectives. Yeah.
So that's a great segue to my next question for you. What are you working on now?
Oh my, it seems like I've always got lots of irons in the fire. Two big things right now. One is I'm writing a second book for my publisher, Horse and Rider Books, and the working title is Riding Change. Well, change
Mm.
is something we all know something about. And,
Mm.
but particularly, I'm no expert on all kinds of life changes, but changes as an equestrian,
Mm.
changes not just in our bodies, but our minds, how we navigate change, how our margin for error changes as we get older, how new fears and anxieties come up, perhaps. Used to be
Mm.
fine trailering my trailer on these mountain roads. Last few years, it's like that would cause me anxiety. My
Mm.
neural pathways thin as we get older. So just how we navigate change, and not just changes within ourself and our horse, changes in the equine industry as a whole, which
Mhm.
is changing rapidly. So
Yeah.
writing change, writing that is my biggest project. My deadline is September. It's scheduled to publish spring of 2026. And the other thing that I'm really excited about is in April, I'm doing a collaboration, and I don't do a lot of collaborations with Kansas Carradine. And I'm not sure if you know Kansas,
Mm.
but she is a Heart Math certified trainer and a guided equine educator. And we met both as presenters at Warwick Schiller's Journey on Summit in Texas in 2023. And
Very
we
cool.
hit it off right away. We both have yoga backgrounds, horse backgrounds, backgrounds in the entertainment industry. And we said, if something came up that we could partner on that makes sense, let's do it. And we decided to offer a retreat called Aligned Equestrians, and it is going to be at the Yogaville Ashram. So it's at an ashram setting, which is very different from most of my following, because I'm mostly at ranches,
Mhm.
resorts, equestrian centers. So those who do have a calling to really dive a little bit more into the yoga end of it, we're going to be collaborating on that in April. So
That's
lots of other
cool.
projects, but those are the two right now that are exciting me the most, and that I'm focusing on at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, very neat. And I'm going to ask you one more question, even though we're kind of getting to the end of our time.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned changes in the equine industry. What are you most hopeful for in terms of changes in the equine industry?
I think I'm seeing those, and I like to think we're all part of those changes. When I wrote my Yoga for Writers, I think it's in the preface, it says, "A new day is dawning on the equine world, and that consciousness and awareness is raising." And I've been in the business, in the yoga world and the horse world for so long, I've seen both change. I've seen yoga
Mm.
get very commercialized. I've seen horsemanship change over the years from kind of the old, rough and tumble cowboy methods and School of Hard Knocks to a more conscious, mindful approach. So that's the direction that I see. I see people focusing a lot more on equestrian wellness.
Mm.
Again, I like to think I'm part of that. You're part of that. Warwick
Yeah.
Schiller's been a big part of that. From the horse perspective, there's so much more heart-based horsemanship, heart-centered horsemanship out there now
Mhm.
than there ever was. Um, so I think those are some of the positive changes that I'm seeing. And another thing, Lisa, that I see is it's not all about the ride anymore, where I think
Yeah.
horsemanship used to just be about riding, whether you're an English or a Western rider. Now there are so many other ways to partner with horses. Liberty work has gotten so popular,
Yeah.
equine facilitated therapy. So there are so many other ways we can partner with equines. And I see that as a change in the industry as well. So I see it evolving, in a good and more conscious way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my hope too. And
Yeah,
the word I heard you just say that is my desire to see the growth continue on is this mindset of partnership, right? That
absolutely.
equines, we
Yes.
get to partner with them, and when you honor a partnership, both entities have value and respect and limits and opportunities for growth. And I think if we look at horses through that partnership mindset, it's
Mhm.
it's holistically better.
It is. And, I think also partnership and leadership go hand in hand.
Mhm.
And kind of similarly, like when I apply a holistic or a yogic minded approach to horsemanship, it doesn't negate good and true and safe horsemanship. That's still
Right.
present. There's a time for leadership to be present, and leadership and partnership can, I think, coexist.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think there's just a lot of new and nicer and softer ways to partner with horses, and kinder ways. And as you say, we get to partner with them, because truly, if they didn't want us to, we wouldn't be doing that. So it is a blessing. It is a gift. It's an honor. One of my horses passed away. He was 34 in last March. So it's almost been a year. My other guy's 30. And truly, yeah, is it cold at the barn? It feels like 9 this morning, and it was snowy. But you know what? It's an honor that I get to do that. And I know it's not going to be forever with these guys. And just to use that term, that I get to do this, I get to partner with them. It's just such a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Cathy, it's been so good to connect with you again and have you on. And for me, reliving all the good of that experience that I had with you, and the fresh reminders of that. And then to also hear that you're still putting out the stuff that we need.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to put it out there, happy to be of service in that way. And, I think we all bring different gifts to the table, and just being able to share those in spaces like this is just wonderful. And I'm grateful for you to have me on. I know we could talk for days about this stuff, and maybe we'll do it again sometime. And for those who want to learn more about me, basically CathyWoodsYoga.com, and that's Cathy with a C. And my website's got all my various offerings and available products to help support people through their equestrianship.
That's awesome. You took the question right out of my mouth. I was going to say, where can people find you? Because that's
I'm pretty easy to find. Yeah.
You're pretty easy to find. And I will include links of what we talked about in the show notes for the episode, so people can find your content. And my encouragement is experience it with Cathy. Go meet up with her somewhere, sometime, and just enhance your humanship and horsemanship through this perspective. I really think it's valuable.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for what you're doing and contributing to the equine world as well, to humans and horses. Appreciate it. Namaste means I honor your inner light. So namaste.
Thank you so much. And I greatly appreciate you as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Liberated Equestrian podcast. Go discover what it means to experience breakthrough, belonging, and becoming as a liberated equestrian. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberated Equestrian Podcast. I'm so grateful to have you as a part of this community. If you loved today's episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow equestrians. For more information and ongoing support, visit theliberatedEquestrian.us, where you'll find show notes and resources to help you become a liberated equestrian. The Liberated Equestrian Podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The content shared in each episode, including discussions, interviews, and advice, reflects the personal opinions and professional insights of the host and guest. The information provided on this podcast is not a substitute for professional mental health care, counseling, or therapy. Listeners should consult a licensed healthcare professional for specific advice regarding their personal situations. Reliance on any information provided by this podcast is solely at the listener's discretion and risk. While every effort is made to provide accurate and up-to-date information, neither Lisa Pulliam nor the Liberated Equestrian Podcast assumes any responsibilities for errors, omissions, or outcomes resulting from the use of this information. By listening to this podcast, you agree that neither the host, guest, or affiliated party shall be held liable for any damages, loss, or harm arising from the use or misuse of the information presented. If you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek immediate assistance from a qualified healthcare provider or call your emergency services in your area. Thank you for listening to the Liberated Equestrian Podcast.